in Asia, they really started with a horse first approach, where I learned first that you have to respect the horse as an animal, and they're going to have good days and bad days. And I think in Europe that's just starting to pick up. So a green colt is kind of a young horse that doesn't have any sort of training yet. Riding internationally has shaped not only who I am as a rider myself, but how I can consult my clients. Even now in Japan, I also ride with Okamoto. He's also a world champion. So I had one lesson with an Olympian where really I just had one lesson with her, and still in my everyday training, I apply some of the exercises she said, and I still give that same advice to my clients.
Welcome back to Rooted and Routed podcast. My name is Sabia Patan Bithuk, and I'm back with somebody really special. It's the first time that we have an expat kid on the podcast as guest. And you may wonder, why would I interview an expat kid? Because her story is quite special. And sometimes we hear expat stories from parents, from adults, but what is exactly the expat life for kids? That I think it's best to hear from an expat kid, although she's not a kid anymore. Let me welcome Sarah Olivier. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm really glad that we are doing this. And just to give a background, Sarah is from Belgium. She was an expat in India, but thereafter, what she did, I want her to tell the story. Sarah, maybe you can explain and share your story.
I started as an expat kid in India, like you said, after moving there from Belgium. And then we moved to France. And then my parents moved to Tokyo. And I moved back to Belgium now, where I'm pursuing my degree in veterinary medicine. Mm-hmm. And I have some interesting side projects as well that I hope we can discuss today.
Sure. Yes, I would love to know that, because that is something I'm excited to talk about. It is something that I don't think so we hear often. You are into equestrian consulting. Yes. And also you've come up with an app which is called VACS, VACS. Do you say VACS or do you say VACS?
We say VACS, yeah.
Maybe let's start with India, where you actually started your love for horse riding.
Yes.
That's where the passion sparked, and your experience in training, competing, and winning. Let's start from there.
So I always wanted to ride horses as a kid, and I kept begging my parents, but it never really fit in the schedule, or it was far away, or it was not a good place to get lessons or things like that. And so when we moved to India, that's when my parents finally said, let's get you in lessons. It's good to be outside, make friends, learn new language. It's a great way to do all of that. Mm-hmm. And so I finally got to start horse riding, and I started at the age of 8, and I have never stopped since, I think.
And from there, the competitions, I think that must be a very different environment, because competing for a child, you see the competition where you don't see a lot of people looking like you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a very special experience for me. And it's something I still hold very dear, to start competing in India, because the environment there is super friendly, and we really had a big team spirit. Mm-hmm. And everybody would support everyone. Or one time I didn't have a riding coat, and somebody that I didn't even know was like, oh, you can borrow mine. And I ended up winning that round, and she ended up winning the round with the same coat. So we even made jokes like, oh, it's a lucky coat and things like that. While when I do competition nowadays, the environment is very different, much more individualistic. And I think just getting started as a kid with really enjoying it and not being super competitive, but just being there to have a good time was a really important foundation for everything I do now.
This thing I've heard before as well, that in the Asian countries, yeah, where the environment is more collective. And when you go back to Europe, it's really individualistic. Because I don't know, I think it is more to do that it is something in the mindset. You're very independent, so you really want to take care of yourself independently, and then it takes a bit of time to open up to somebody else and help, because you feel like, since I'm an independent, I think you're also independent and taking care of your stuff. So let me not disturb that person. And yeah, it's a very different environment. Coming back from that individualistic environment, as an expat kid, when you were studying, and that was an English speaking school, and after India and France, how did you handle the transition into higher education now in Belgium?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of a tough transition at first because even though at home we still spoke Flemish and, we tried to maintain it as much as possible, no matter how much you try to maintain it, things like school would automatically become talked about in English because my education was in English. And so coming back to Belgium, I think I also had to do a Flemish language exam that I had to pass because I didn't have a high school diploma in Flemish. And that was actually quite easy. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is going to be really easy and things like that. While coming back into it, I think it was a little bit more difficult than I thought because, yes, I speak the language and yes, it's my mother tongue, but I hadn't seen the language in an educational context in quite some time because the context of a language in third grade versus higher education kind of changes. So there were some words that my professor would use and everybody would be nodding along and being like, yeah, I understand exactly what this means. And I would look around, quickly go on Google Translate, like, what does he mean? And then I would follow. So in the beginning, that was a little bit hard because of the way that being an expat kid is. When you have an education in English at home, your brain is not going to first translate it back to your mother tongue and then explain it to your parents. And then it just becomes too complicated. So the default language for my education became English. And it took some time to transition back into Flemish.
And do you also have the thinking process also in English, or is it still in Dutch, or you switch?
It's still both. Nowadays, it's always been both. And just kind of depending on the context of my life at that moment, it can switch. So now it's a little bit more in Dutch because I'm at home and I'm studying and things like that. But if I go back to my parents in Tokyo, where we do speak a lot of English for like 2 weeks, it'll go back to being more English than Dutch. So it's always kind of both, but the balance changes depending on where I am or what I'm doing.
And in the transition, who was your biggest support? Was there any?
My parents. Absolutely, my parents. They might live like 9,000 kilometers, maybe 10,000 kilometers away, but I call my mom every day. So I feel like sometimes I talk to my mom more than some of my peers whose parents live right next door. So I think it was really my parents who, even though they're so far away, every day they would support me as best as they could. And then afterwards, I met my boyfriend as well, and now he really supports me through that kind of transition as well.
I think I'm quite curious as a parent, right? How it would be. Is it different, do you think, if you are living with your parent and if you are far away from your parent? Do you feel the bond is closer, tighter, or you feel like, okay, I am independent, I kind of need my parents, but lesser?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of both. So when you are an expat, I feel that you grow closer with your family because when you just pack up your family and move to somewhere totally new, you don't really have friends yet and you don't really have that support network far away yet. So you rely on each other more as a family. And then now that my parents moved far away, I think I am very independent and I do most of the things myself. But I still talk a lot to my parents, or when I'm not sure about something that I'm doing, I'll still call them. And like, or if something bad happens, the first person that I still try to call is my mom, no matter where she is at that moment or what time it is. So.
And how many hours of difference is it now? In
the winter, it's 8, and in the summer, it's 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. Coming back to your riding experiences, you've ridden horses across continents and worked with everyone from green colts to elite athletes. How was that global experience, and how has that helped your approach to horse riding, training, and adaptability? And maybe you can start with explaining what is a green colt, because I think the audience, not everybody knows these terms.
So a green colt is kind of a young horse that doesn't have any sort of training yet. So in all of my consulting business now, I work with all kinds of horses, from green colts to athletes. And I think that riding internationally has shaped not only who I am as a rider myself, but how I can consult my clients, because I can pick the best from every single country. So every trainer and in every country, they have different ways of doing things. And because I've seen so many, I can pick and choose like, oh, that thing I really liked over there, or this I really liked over there, and kind of combine it into what I think is the best of all the worlds.
And do you think there's a difference between the ones who have been training and competing within the same continent, let's say only only Europe, and you've come from Asia, you've done it in India and in Japan as well a couple of times. Do you think there's a bit of difference that you have more understanding?
I think there's a bit of a difference, not only in the way that I work with the horses, but how I approach my clients and, being in an environment with other people as well, because I noticed that I bring more of the team spirit and I want the best for everyone that I learned in Asia, while my European friends and clients are more like, no, I want to win. So, you know, I'm going to do this, while I'm more like, oh, we can just have a fun time, support everyone. And even when I go out and compete with some of my clients, I'll stand on the sidelines and cheer for everyone, whether or not they're my client. So I think that's maybe a bit of a difference. And then as well in the riding part of things, in Asia, they really started with a horse first approach, where I learned first that you have to respect the horse as an animal, and they're going to have good days and bad days. And I think in Europe that's just starting to pick up, but we're a bit more behind on that, especially at the elite levels. People want to win and are competitive first, and the horse comes second, and that's really not how I learned how to do things.
It's again the same thing, like individualistic, right?
Yeah.
Me. And then, I mean, it's in a way not bad, but I don't know. I think it's the mindset that you have the advantage of being in different environment because of expat. Otherwise, if you would not be an expat kid and competing and being in this business as an entrepreneur, I think it would be very different. The approach would be different. The understanding would be different. And I think what I see that with this advantage, you can go quite far.
Absolutely. It's always when I submit my CV somewhere and you say, oh, I speak 3 languages and I've lived here and here and here and I have an international school diploma, whether or not you're the best candidate, your name will always pop up. And maybe you won't get that job, but they'll definitely remember you if they're looking for someone else. And I think that's a really big advantage. It's just you stand out as a candidate, as a person, as a student, as whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I can believe that. With your experience in writing, you've also had the experience, the writing experience with Philip Aerts, Lara, the Leaderkerk and Karin Donkers. Was there a lesson or a moment from those experiences that still guides you?
I think I've learned a couple of lessons. So some of them are just practical training tips. I had one lesson with an Olympian where really I just had one lesson with her, and still in my everyday training, I apply some of the exercises she said, and I still give that same advice to my clients. While from other top riders, I mainly learned what I don't want to do in the future. A lot of them, it's very automatic. The groom warms up the horse, they get on the horse, they jump the horse for 10 minutes, they give the horse away to someone else. They bring in the next horse. And it's such a automated machine for me that kind of takes the joy out of riding, because yes, obviously nobody wants to spend their time cleaning stalls, but it's still part of the whole picture for me. And okay, as you get bigger, you can allocate some of the jobs, but for me, it's still really important that before I get on my horse, that I have a relationship with them essentially. And so I've learned different lessons. Even now in Japan, I also ride with Okamoto. He's also a world champion. And there I also learned how he kind of balances riding at such a high level and teaching and, things like that, and taking care of all the horses. So he also taught me how to manage all these different things. So I think from all the big riders, either you learn something that you really keep and you use every day and that's very practical, or maybe you learn something that I wouldn't do it like that. I would do it differently. So I think every big rider has their lesson, just in different ways.
And so for how many tournaments have you participated?
At this point, quite a lot. The last few years have been a bit calmer because, I've been studying, and then I've had young horses, so they weren't really ready to compete. And so right now it's a bit calmer, but as we go into the next years, actually my horses are ready to start competing. I'm getting ready to compete in Japan. So everything's going to be picking up again. So that's quite exciting.
So you have horses, did you say? How many horses did you have? Or do you have?
Right now I have 3.
And they're all around where you are studying in the college, or am I?
Yeah, so I keep my horses myself on a field because I think it's important that horses spend as much time outside as they can, just being a horse. And then I take care of them every single day.
Every single day?
Yeah.
That is impressive, because that needs a dedication and commitment, not just the experience of here and there riding. No, it needs Yeah, it demands much more of your time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the horses take up most of my time. But that's kind of what you get in return is because I put so much time in taking care of them. I also noticed that our relationship is a lot stronger. And maybe in competition where you're coming to kind of a sticky situation where maybe another horse would refuse to jump because they're like, oh, I'm not going to do this. My horses are like, you know what, we'll try and we'll see what happens. So I think having a good relationship with the horse is really important, even in a competitive environment.
I believe that. I agree. Yeah. Now let's talk about your app. Like, how did you get this idea and what exactly is VACS?
So with my equestrian journey, I've had horses for I think 9 years now. So that's quite a long time. So that also unfortunately means vet visits for the last 9 years, especially my horse that's currently retired. He had kind of a penchant for constantly having something wrong. So at some point, I feel like I saw the vet more than I saw my own family. And every single time that the vet would come, they love doing, kind of the medicine side of it, but nobody likes doing admin. And especially they were so busy because they would come to me for an emergency, leave right away for the next emergency and things like that. And after a while, I kind of started questioning like, okay, there has to be a better way to do this because it's not really nice for neither vet nor client to have the vet come and to get your bill 6 months later because I forgot what happened. They forgot what happened. And to be honest, I probably already spent the money I put aside 6 months ago. So slowly, I was like, yeah, maybe we should do something about that. And then we put it aside again. And then I started studying and now I have a new vet and she works totally alone. She doesn't have any sort of admin or like a cabinet or anything like that. And so I'm still waiting for some of my bills from 2 years ago. And that for me was kind of like the final catalyst to say, okay, apparently she's not alone in this struggle. We have to be able to make a vet's life easier because it's just not possible on their end to keep things profitable and on my end to be able to do all my administration and submit things on time. So from there, we kind of got the idea to make an app because there are software programs in place right now for things like that, but no vet is going to take their laptop in the middle of the pasture and with their gross cow covered hands is going to start typing, and nobody has time for that. And that's also not really pleasant. But a vet, especially now, will bring their phone everywhere to get the directions, to call clients, things like that. And so from there, we got the idea, what if we make one-stop shopping of their phone and put their admin on there as well? So while they're having a little wrap-up conversation with the client, they can immediately make the bill and just send it right away.
And is the app completed? The features, how to operate, is that done, or is it still in a stage where you're still
it's done. So what we've added as well is not only the administration part on the side of billing, but we've also added a signature that the client needs to sign just to avoid, since there's been an uptick in distrust between client and vet. We wanted to eliminate that as much as possible. So now if there's any sort of disagreement, you can just say, look, you signed it. You said this is what I did. And it's done. No need for lawyers and things like that. And as well, we incorporated in Europe, there's for food producing animals, if they get certain medications, that needs to be written down on a formula with kind of the amount of time between when the animal received the medication, when they can be slaughtered, those type of things. And that's integrated into the app as well. So it's really no more paper, no more hassle, things like that. So on that end, all the features that we want for right now are completed. The only thing we're going to do into the next couple of months is we want to launch in France and the Netherlands. And there, the medication form for food producing animals is slightly different. So we just kind of need to adapt that.
And I'm sure when you came up with this idea for the app, which I'm sure there are many others who are also doing the same because of the AI and the whole digital evolved. There's so many things happening that everybody tries to do their best and invent something. In all of this, did you have to go through a lot of statistics, like research as to how much do we really need, how many equestrian, do we call it equestrian farms, or what is it?
Yeah, you can call it that, yes.
So how many are there in Europe? Because I know Ireland, UK are the places where the opportunities are much more than than somewhere else. So I'm sure that is the reason why you're aiming at only like Netherlands and Belgium and France, right?
Yeah, we're aiming there first, just because for EU laws, that's a lot easier. While if we start going to the UK, we really have to make some bigger adaptations, and that's a market I'm just not familiar with. In Belgium, I live here, I study here to be a vet. I see the laws in my classes, I see the issues. France, we lived there for 5 years. I had horses there. You see the issues. And then the Netherlands, my software developer is located there. So they have some kind of insight on that sense. So we just want to start small, close to home, where we kind of know what we're doing before we have to do major research into other countries. But to develop this, we did do a lot of research, like with vets, what they wanted, because our original idea was maybe an iPad app and some software. And that's when it came up amongst vets that they already have expensive software by big players, but they just don't use it because it's on their laptop or it's on an iPad, but they forget to bring the iPad, and then nothing ends up getting written down, and then they pay a lot of money for a subscription they don't use and things like that. So that's where like having conversations with the people who the product is intended for was really important in our development process. And statistics, we didn't really have the budget to do our own research, but we did kind of look into other studies, and like the Federation of Vets in Europe, they did a big study on what the biggest issues are that vets are facing today in Europe. And it kind of came down to rude clients, administration, and rising costs. So unfortunately, rising costs, we can't really do much about. But things like administration, we wanted to tackle that. And with the rude clients, that's why we incorporated the signature. So we kind of worked with the research that was already there and did service with vets that really believed in coming up with a new solution. And that's kind of how we got to all the features we have today.
That sounds quite brilliant, and I'm sure it must have been a process of brainstorming and finding your ways and then connecting dots. I love that process, the thing, because you're connecting your passion and also making an impact, actionable ones. And once you have that passion, and the finding the way becomes easy, but of course, you need the right people as part of your team,
Yeah.
with the right mindset.